In this interview, I'm speaking to Luke Jermay, and Luke has had a massive impact on magic and mentalism, and is certainly one of the most unique characters that magic has. It's an interesting one for me, this Luke, because I've met you over the years a couple of times, a handful of times maybe. I obviously know about you, but I don't know a great deal about you,
Right.
and I don't know if many people do. To be honest with
I
you,
think
you're a
think
bit of an
everybody
enigma,
thinks they
aren't
do.
you?
I think everybody thinks they do. I think everybody thinks they know exactly what I'm like, and they actually don't. So I'm not surprised by that.
So, what I'll do is I'm just going to sort of. I first heard about you. It was yours was quite a kind of a weird introduction, I think, or maybe into the world of magic, as it were, or the world of performing magical things.
Right.
Because
I've
firstly,
no
what do you consider
intent-
yourself to be?
Well, this is the first question that's worth answering. I'm very proud to call myself a magician. I think even though I make my living from doing mentalism, I've never really been one of those mentalists that have put that big separation between magic and mentalism. And mainly because I started out as a proper solid magician, began sort of doing, I did a dove act when I was a kid, like proper solid magic. And then slowly moved across into doing mentalism. But I think it's really close to impossible to be good at doing mentalism without having been a magician first. So I think all of that, those trying to separate out magic, mentalists, and all the rest of it between ourselves is useless, because we all know that we're just doing, would you for a second consider calling yourself, I'm not a magician, I'm a cups and balls worker? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just not that useful. So I'm fine with being called a magician or a mentalist or any of that. I know some mind readers get a bit touchy about, if they're called a magician, but I don't care. Professionally, I think it's a different issue then, because then it becomes about perception and what it is that you're selling. But I just mean within us, within our community, what I'm doing. There's no need to try and hoodwink.
Well, I mean, a lot of the time we don't know what you're doing, Luke, and that's half the problem, isn't it? That's the thing, isn't it? So you started off as a kind of you can do a pass, can you? You can do a classic pass.
Yeah. I'll give you the sort of rundown of. So I'm 26 now. Started magic when I was had that same flirtatious sort of childhood with magic sets, and did the same thing that everybody did, where they got bored with it and put it in the drawer and then got it out again a couple of months later and so on. But I properly started with an intense interest when I was around 10 or 11, and then had sort of a really fortunate series of events where Ron McMillan sort of became part of, and I know certainly you'll remember Ron and know Ron from the international days.
Absolutely.
Perhaps some of the listeners won't, but Ron McMillan sort of came into my life and became my early mentor in magic, and that also meant that he would sort of have me working in international magic at the best magic shop in London on the weekends on a Saturday. So as a little kid, I was in there, which was one of the most pivotal points of my learning magic, because not only are the McMillan family so fantastic, all of them are just so nice and welcoming, and they care about magic and they care about the people who go in their shop. But for me, they were, and in equal measure, it wasn't just Ron, Martin and even Teresa as well, and Georgie, the whole family sort of guiding me and giving me advice. But also Martin would say, what book do you want to read? And the magic shop became the library. Now, for a kid that's starting out in magic that doesn't come from a sort of rich family, a lot of kids in magic now seem to have very rich families that are willing to throw money at buying the latest DVDs and so on. But for me, that didn't have that background, having the magic shop as your library was massively important. And also that brought me into contact with, some people that I still consider to be the best magicians in the world today. Jerry Sadovitz was in the shop at that point.
Right.
And then names that certainly American people won't know, but us British people remember. Bobby Bernard, who I think is an unsung sort of brilliant.
Bobby's a legend, isn't he?
A super character. He's hilarious to be around for good and unusual reasons. But he was really helpful to me as a kid. And then Alex Elmsley on and off would be around, Pat Page. So as a kid, I got to sort of the benefit of being introduced by Ron. That was it. I'm sure that was it.
Got the golden ticket.
Yeah, precisely. And a massively fortunate situation to be in. And also it's during that time that I first met Darren, that would then later become a part of professional work in the future. So yeah, from a young age was sort of surrounded by those people. And I think most importantly, those people gave me a progression in learning. I think Like right now, the whole brick and mortar magic shop versus the internet magic shop argument, I think, is null and void. I think the truth of the matter is most brick and mortar magic shops don't really do it good enough anymore, and they're a bit lazy. And then most internet websites provide far better service, so it's obvious that people are going to go and buy it from online. But the one thing that you can never beat a brick and mortar for, if it's a good one, not if it's a bad one, but if it's a good one, is the fact that you've got a human being there helping you progress and telling you what's the next step. And I had that as more than anybody could ever hope for in that setup.
And you also had that, I mean, I come from the Marvin's Magic sort of.
Yeah. So you had
and most of the people I've interviewed, and it's that idea. For you, it's hours. It's kind of flight time, isn't it? You're behind the counter and you're doing it and you're working, and it is the best environment to learn.
A very good way of learning what tricks people like is to try and sell them to them.
Yeah, exactly. Because you have to sell the effect. I mean, that is a key point. You are literally selling the effect.
I think when I was growing up in Magic and when you were knocking about in Marvin's, it was a different scenario because we were selling majority of the stuff. The pitching was done to people that were coming in to buy a trick to do at the Christmas party. They weren't magicians. They were still lay people. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So Marvin's setup, you're working not with like super slick magicians, But in international, at least, when the working guys and the pros came in, it was a little session. You didn't sit there demming tricks to them. But then the slew of normal people coming in wanting a trick for their grandson or for their, for their friends or whatever, you are actually just performing magic tricks for normal people. And then at the end of it, you get a direct, quantitative result, which is they either buy the trick or they don't. So you know whether you did it well or not. And I think that's missed. I think people imagine working in a magic shop is just hanging out with magicians all the time. But actually, exactly like you say, that flight time aspect is massive in a magic shop. So that's the early years. But then also during this period of time, Ron was sort of taking me to conventions as well. So at like 11 or 12 probably, he was putting me in these like weird magic competitions in Belgium. But it was just an excuse to get me to go and see all this stuff. That's the truth of the matter. He knew that if he said, "Oh, we should put your manipulation act in this competition in Portugal," he knew that I would work on it. So that was the deadline. And to this day, if I haven't got a deadline, I don't finish anything. Right. I'm quite bad at starting millions of different things and then only finishing a couple of them.
We're all
right.
I'm exactly like that.
That follow through thing is a nightmare. But you give me a deadline, then it's done. And I think that does come from Macmillan actually. So I was going to various conventions and getting to see, really great magicians like Salvano and Finn John. And again, I feel like a dinosaur saying this stuff because we're so used to looking at the landscape of what magic and mentalism is now. And those names don't fit in anymore. Salvano doesn't fit in with the, the illusionist generation.
Yeah.
So I feel like a dinosaur, even though I'm the same age as most of them. But that's why, because of that. Because of that background and coming up and realising that, Pat Page knew everything about magic that was ever to be known and you should listen to him.
But, it's kind of funny because you talk about the sort of the input that you had and a lot of the people who are now successful who have success in magic are people who've had that kind of richness in their background, that kind of depth in their background. I mean, I don't know if there are any sort of hugely successful internet-based magicians, if you know what I mean. Guys who've built their career purely from buying stuff off the internet.
I'm sure there will be eventually.
Oh, there will be. I mean, because it's the YouTube generation. I mean, but there's a difference between being well known for doing something online.
Oh, for sure.
Between creating a career that is, sustainable and. So...
Yeah, no, for sure. I think the other thing to remember with that sort of challenge, it's going to be interesting. The first one that is the guy that crosses over from YouTube and becomes.
The Buck twins are a classic. They're probably the closest guys who've used the internet as their medium, as it were.
But the thing about the Bucks to remember is they're knowledgeable, smart, and grounded, and aware of history.
Yeah, I know they've got a deep-rooted sense of magic as well.
They really get it, and they've always known what they want to do. So that makes a big difference. But what I think interestingly, we're at a point where there are people that don't know magic can be performed outside of YouTube.
Yeah.
Where that is their main primary purpose is to do it on YouTube. And then when they come to, just go along to a magic club for a night. Just go along to a local magic club, or maybe don't, based on your expression, but just go along to a local magic club one night and you'll see, the kids that clearly have never seen a magician that's told them, oh, you should use one deck of cards, or the props should be in your pockets, you shouldn't be getting them out of bags. But obviously in their current sort of frame, which is I perform this in front of my camera, none of that matters.
Yeah.
So they're the things that I think are getting lost. Like knowing if you need a scarf at some point during an act, you roll it. So when you take it out, it unfolds. Because you pick that stuff up by accident. You know, in your informative years, you pick that up by accident, where you're watching like Finn John or Salvano or Macmillan or any of the guys like that, where that was just what they did while they were explaining the trick, and then you just did it. Whereas now, a lot of those sort of, I think of it as back when I was learning magic, I think it was more about craftsman, and now it's more about showman. And that's a bad way of putting it, really, because it sounds like showman is better, but I don't think it is. You know.
Yeah, I think the thing that's missing now is, and it's very fundamental, I think, it comes down to something as simple as eye contact. I mean,
right.
Because people are used to performing, you know, they perform to a camera, and they might be technically phenomenal.
Right.
But unless you're making eye contact, it stops becoming a human interaction.
That's an interesting one.
And it's a very simple thing, you know. It's that simple.
No, I've not thought about it, but now you've said it, yeah, it's screamingly clear. Yeah. So keep it on track with. I'll go off on lots of little variants.
Yeah, no worries. I'm happy with that.
But keep it on track with the sort of the background. So then, yeah, did a number of conventions, but basically as an excuse to meet, you know, other magicians as a kid, like little kid, and then. Around 16 or 15, I'd already read sort of 13 Steps and Animan and all of the textbook mentalism things, Cassidy even. By that time I'd read everything that I could find. And I had the constant niggle in the back of my head about you can't do this because you're young, but I've always looked old. My hair's falling out like it's on fire. I've got wrinkles, you know, like I've always looked old. I'll always look old, older than I am at least.
Right.
So at 16, I kind of thought, you know what, I'm going to give it a go. And by this point, I had a residency in Camden, in London, doing a sort of walk-around show. It's a funny first professional job I ever had. The guy wanted to book me for a 6-week walk-around stint. 16 years old, I've got no idea what you should charge. So he says to me, how much is it going to cost? And I go, £100. No idea. Literally no clue how to price it or even how to ask for it, right? So he says, no problem. And then I go the next week and start doing the walk around magic, and he pays me the £100. And I go, oh, thank you. I think, oh, that's nice. He's paid it all in one go. And then I realise on the way home that night, oh God, it's going to cost me like 50 or 60 to commute backwards and forwards. This was I should have asked for 200, not 100. And then the next week I go back and he pays me again £100. And I think it's a test. I think like if he's trying to work me out. So I say, oh, you've already paid me. He said, oh, no, it's £100 a night. And I was like, whoa, okay. Obviously this is worth more than I might priced it at. And I ended up staying, doing that for about 2.5 years that would have been 15, not 16. So that would have been 15. Because then this guy was amazing. He was called Panikos, owned a Greek restaurant in Camden, and obviously loved magic. And he just kept upping my fee and bringing me in more times. And I never asked for any of it, which sort of explains my misunderstanding of business to this day. I have no clue how it works. But yeah, he just kept saying, oh, we need you in 4 nights a week, and now it's £300 a night, and just kept going up and up and up. So for about 2 years, I worked in Camden, and that really helped my style as well, because it was a hipster restaurant. It wasn't it wasn't like a quiet Camden one. It was right in the middle, and sort of, you know, hip 20-something designers, you know, I'm doing magic to them. So I decided, anyway, so I'm doing that, and I decide to switch over to mentalism, and I assume it's going to get laughed off the first table I do it in, and actually the response was 10 times stronger than anything I'd felt before. So pretty much at that age, at 16, having a year of experience doing walk around behind me, that's when I decided that I would only do mentalism.
And at that point, presumably, Darren had his first special, so there was an understanding of mentalism.
16,
10 years ago?
Yeah, so it would have been 10 years ago. So I think at this point Darren's first special hadn't aired yet, but was certainly...
Right.
Darren was on the scene, you know, and the first special hadn't aired. But, yeah, I was aware of Darren.
Right, okay.
Yeah. I can't recall whether the special had aired or not. But
no, it's just that sort of... Because that perception changed of mentalism quite, literally overnight.
Overnight, yeah. Interestingly now, I think the only way to make mentalism work is to go the opposite direction, in England at least, because Darren has so saturated everything and talk about a testament to one amazing career. That now, the minute you do anything revolving around the way someone thinks, it's it's Darren Brown. Like, he's totally owned it. So I think it needs reinventing again in England.
Yeah, no, I've had this conversation with Mark Paul.
Right,
Who's a phenomenal,
great mentalist.
Mentalist, and is also, and was working it along, before Darren came out, and like Graham Jolly as well, another great mentalist. And so, they're having to go, oh God, now we're being compared to Darren.
Right. I mean, rightly so. I still think Darren is the best out there. Like,
he's great. I mean, he's
and from a creative perspective, like, I've never worked with anybody better than Darren, and I've worked with a lot of musicians in a creative capacity, and Darren is just so much strides ahead in.
And you've got Andy with him as well, or he had Andy very close. And Andy is a phenomenal creative power as well.
A brilliant force. I think the things with Darren that really sort of stand out in my head, at least, are as he's become more and more famous, he's never become horrible.
Yeah.
And I don't see that with a lot of the other sort of guys I've worked with. Not all of them, but some of them stick in my head as being like they lost the plot when they got famous. Whereas Darren, if anything, Darren has become nicer as he got famous. Yeah, and that an example of his personality and why I hold him up in such high esteem. I took my mum to go and see his show when it was on tour, the last live show. My mum's not used to being around people off the telly, like that meant something to her when afterwards Darren was like, I'll come backstage. And he spent most of his focus talking to her and making her feel special.
Right.
That means a lot to me, having been around so many different famous guys, stuff like that really matters. So yeah, but anyway, we're going so far, of course. But
No, we are. So come back to this. We'll come back to you because let's talk about you as opposed to Darren. Because when you started doing the mentalism, and then I kind of started this by saying you came onto sort of my road. I mean, I'm not sort of so, at the time I was a street performer, whatever. I'm not so steeped in magic that I know everything that's going on.
But all of that background that I've just given you, nobody was aware of.
Right.
Yeah, that was not anything that anybody would know about for any reason anyway.
Because it seemed to me that you just kind of you you weren't there one day.
Yeah.
And then the next day everyone was talking about Luke Jermay. And did that pivot around anything? Was it? I remember you putting a book out, didn't you?
I think it would probably be that.
What was that? It was like Seven
Deceptions?
Seven Deceptions. Was that what it's called? Yeah, because I remember getting the email for it and thinking, who's this? Who is he? What's this about?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting story, that book. Basically, it was tricks that were developed in sort of walk-around environments using very unusual technique. Technique I still use today, and technique I still think is really valid. But I do think the message of that book kind of got lost with my assuming... I'll get to that in a second. But... so yeah, that book was stuff that I'd come up with in a space of probably 2 years in the walk-around environment. And it was all done in front of real people, night after night. And then I emailed Kenton Nepper, American mentalist, asking for his permission about sort of one idea in the book used something that was more or less the same as something of Kenton's. So I needed, that phase in the routine. I wanted his permission for it. And I sent him the trick and he was really enthusiastic about it and said, have you got anything else? So I sent him some other bits and pieces. And then by the end of it, by the end of our communications, he wanted to buy it and publish it as a book. I never went in with the intention of it being a book. I went in with the intention of it being a collection of tricks that I was going to email around to people I knew. Right. Like literally, look, here's some stuff I've been doing. I wonder if it would be good for you. And then it came out as a book, and then everyone started going mental, and a lot of people loved it, and a lot of people hated it, which is the theme of my existence.
Yeah. But I mean, there's that also expression, mate. If you're not pissing someone off, you're doing something wrong. So. Right.
Well, in that case, I'm a huge success.
Yeah. No. Well, I mean, I think it's true. I think you have to divide people. Otherwise, it all becomes fairly mediocre, doesn't it? What's the point?
Yeah, I agree with that. But so the book came out, and then a lot of people loved it. A lot of the sort of top boys instantly got it. Like the guys that had been worked, like Michael Webber and Banachek and guys like that. They instantly knew what I was doing and why I was thinking in that way. And then a lot of sort of other people that maybe don't perform as much and so on. Just sort of doubted how these methods would work, because a lot of them were based on psychological principles, which at that point was still a pipe dream. Like for most people, they considered that stuff to be a pipe dream. And also, it's probably a matter of timing, because that book would have come out after Darren. So in this country, there was that fever pitch of that
Yeah.
stuff. And then this book came out that was a bit like that stuff. So that book divided people. But then I started doing lectures and doing the material. But I think I'm the only magician. I don't do it anymore because it's just not practical. But at that point, I insisted that lectures be filled the front row with lay people for the first half of the lecture.
Right, so you could use the...
So I could really do it for them, you know. And so then, yeah, I did a number of lectures, and then people started going, oh, this stuff does work. And in retrospect, I think the smartest thing to have done would have been to have put a book out that had a mixture of traditional technique and composition with the more avant-garde technique. Because then, pretty much after that book, the material that I've published has been pretty much solid combinations of crazy new ideas, but also proper classic ideas. When I published the book, I assumed that everybody understood that this was the type of material that you did after you had a solid foundation.
Right.
Because I would never dream of doing, I would, at that time of my life, I never would have imagined somebody would have jumped to something like that before they had read 13 steps. But now that's completely different because there's not that process anymore that we were talking about earlier.
Well, I mean, that's the same across every aspect of magic, isn't it? You've got guys who can cut a packet of cards, 27,000 different ways, but have, can't do a decent pick a card, find a card routine,
Precisely.
That's a different argument. So going back to your process, going back to your, you're saying about these sort of ideas that you came up with when you were, relatively young. I mean, you still are relatively young.
That material was developed between the ages of 15 and 17. So yeah.
So what was feeding into that? Was it just was it almost like sort of, and to take this in the nicest possible way?
Yeah.
Was it also possibly the fact that you didn't know any better? You didn't know that it didn't work. So
yes, it's funny. I had this conversation a couple of days ago with somebody about how, when I was younger, I would have done anything at the drop of a hat. I would have had an idea, and I would have had an idea in real time at a table, and then it would be the next thing up on the set list, and it would work. And there was a very intuitive understanding of how these techniques worked. And there was zero fear. And I still maintain that the majority of those tricks, for them to be successful, you have the number one thing is belief and confidence in them. In the same way that it's stage hypnosis without an induction is all it is.
Yeah.
But you have to have that conviction level up. And when I was a kid, I didn't know any different. Whereas now, when I go and do a show, if I've got a new routine in it, I'm shaken up by it. Like, I'm like, oh God, I've got that new bit coming now. I've got that new bit coming now. And I have to really, it takes a long while for material to go in my show now.
So when you're 15, 16, 17, where did that confidence come from?
Performing, I think. Like, I've never really cared about performing for magicians. It just happens that I seem to have a decent ability to fool them. But I think the only reason that I can fool them is because I put all of the emphasis on actually performing the trick instead of anything else, and then they miss the same basic methods we all use. But so I think that confidence mainly would have come from just performing and knowing that people love magic and not being embarrassed of being a magician. I think a lot of people are embarrassed of it, and I've never been embarrassed. So feeling confident in sort of the technique and the fact that I had practiced this material enough to know that it was worthwhile, and also that loving sort of nice environment of this specific residency in Camden, where you felt like the owner was your granddad. Suddenly that really takes a lot of pressure off. That's what I mean about the fortunate series of events. To go from meeting the Macmillan family and having their input to then your first professional job being this amazing guy that was absolutely nurturing and an environment that was perfect for learning your craft. That without those two specific sort of moments happening, I think it would have been a different thing.
So what? Talk about failure for a bit then. So how did you deal? Because I mean, I would imagine with a lot of the stuff that you do, and and a lot of people who will read your material, and I mean, failure is a huge part of being a magician. Mm-hmm. Because if you don't, I mean, it's I'm not a big believer in you have to fail in order to succeed, but I think you have to be prepared to fail.
Yeah, well, there's a great quote.
I mean, how do you cope with failure? Because it can't work all the time.
No, I mean, the other thing to realise is that book, that one book, Seven Deceptions, might give this impression that it's a show full of that material. And obviously, I know that that that's never going to be the case, but it seems that some people imagine they can go and do a 2-hour show of that material. So no, I mean in a show I'll do one trick maybe that's using that technique, knowing that the tricks beforehand have given me enough credibility that I'm more than likely going to succeed. You know, so
But I mean,
there's
no, I mean, from a personal point of view, I'm just trying to sort of, from a personal point of view, how do you cope with, what's your sort of view of failing?
right. Well, now I suppose I've got two answers. I've got the answer from back then, and I've got the answer from now. So the answer from back then was I don't give a shit, and that is partly still my answer now. I don't give a shit. You know, I'm doing. I've never been interested in making four aces turn face up. Like, I've done it and I've learnt it and I enjoy it and I think it's fun to look at and it's a beautifully constructed magic trick, but it's not really anything, is it? Like, you can make it something, but as a kid it was like I'd far rather be stopping my pulse or stopping somebody else's pulse than making rabbits jump across. So it was always kind of this mindset of miracles ain't easy, and if it doesn't go wrong, well, maybe you'll see one next week. You know, like...
And now you're still sort of the same mindset?
Well, the nature of my show has switched completely over the last 3 years to the point where now pretty much everything in the show is Q&A based, so personal information being revealed. Q&A is misleading because it's not necessarily I'm answering questions, but personal information. So there never really is a failure in the show now because there can't be.
Because you get paid to do it.
Right, well, but more importantly, it's got to a point where I'm more interested in the stories that exist within the room and how I tie together people's stories and make them realise certain things about themselves, that the tricks themselves become secondary. Tricks are only interesting to me now when I see them as being a fantastic vehicle for a theatrical divide, like for a theatrical moment. So I get this great professional life where I get to do my show, which I love doing because it's about people and it's about what people care about, and I love that show. But then I get to, vent all the sort of magician frustration that I might have by creating tricks for Dynamo or whoever I'm consulting for at the time. But that, I think, is one of the secrets to the fact that there really can never be a failure in my show because my show's about them succeeding.
Right.
So it doesn't matter if it fails because it's not me. Is that not particularly eloquent? But
no, I know exactly what you mean. It's
the whole purpose of the show is to make this group of people succeed at things and connect with each other.
And mentalism benefits from a degree of imperfection as well, doesn't it? I mean, it always has. So.
An obvious example would be certain points I'll get names slightly askew or slightly off. I think a level of believability comes from understandable mistakes. I think you're paid to succeed.
Yeah.
So I think, like, if, people talk about the Chankanasta, sort of, he'd go 25 minutes and nothing would happen. It's like, yeah, that's awesome. I'm never going to do that. Like, no. Why would you do that? They're paying you to be there. They're paid to fail. Like, so I'm not a big fan of the, like, massive miss, which some people are. I like mistakes that are then understandable. So, for example, if someone's thinking of a 6... you reveal it as a 9. Oh, I always get those two confused. Yeah. So it is a mistake, but you've at least got some sort of logical justification,
Sorry to bring Darren back into it, but I did a show with Darren about a year ago.
Yeah.
And he was trying something new out because it was quite a small venue. And it was just too perfect for me. I mean, right. I think Darren's fantastic and his performance was brilliant. But I was stood in the wings thinking this is too perfect. Right. And because it was too perfect, I kind of backtracked and thought, right, well, there is only one way this could be achieved.
The thing that I think is missing in mentalism now is a sense of... It's funny, we know that our art form goes through cycles. You just look in the old magazines and you see that the same old arguments come back time and time again. But I think, for me, it should be really hard. Like, it should be really hard to read someone's mind. That shouldn't be easy. It's not easy. So, like, just standing there and boom, 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 and everything's right all the time, and there's no effort, and there's no investment from the audience in the process, then it's bollocks.
Yeah.
That's my feeling on it. Like, but the more the audience... I'm trying to buy an iPhone 4S, right? It's a nightmare. Getting the new iPhone is a nightmare. You have to go online, you have to reserve it, the reservations. If you've not done it in the first 4 minutes, there's none left. Then you have to pick a specific half an hour block that you'll go and pick it up, and you can only pick it up until 12:30. That is a lot of investment from me and my life to buy a product. But I know it will make me love the product at the end of the day, and I know the fact that I can't reserve it because it keeps being, out of stock makes me want it even more. So that's what I mean about the investment in, the audience, in my mind, have to invest and go through something
Yeah.
in order for this to work.
Well, I
And
mean,
I think that's missing.
yeah, no, I mean, it's because I mean, mind reading, I mean, mentalism, mind reading. It's almost going back to what I was saying about eye contact. It's an
Right.
organic process. It's
Hmm.
too. It's
At its best.
yeah, and it requires a bit of graininess and a little bit of
Right.
earth and soil and muck and dirt in order to create something that's going to push through. And
Right.
sorry to be sort of so my nature analogy there,
That's
but it's just, that's what I see it as. But it is something that is, because it is organic, because it's person and it's people and people. That
But
earthiness and that
precisely. Yeah.
graininess is really useful in.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I think without that, it's well, it just this. I just find it hard to buy that. To
Yeah.
believe in that. And also, I'm for the first time sort of doing different venues and different performance environments. I'm not necessarily doing theatres like I was in America, where the rules change. So there's no hard and fast, but the rules change.
So you brought up America there. You did Vegas, didn't you?
Las Vegas,
You're a Vegas act.
best place to lose your mind.
How did that all come about?
Um, I had been living in Vegas for a number of years at that point already. I had originally gone there during a lecture tour where I met somebody called Chris Angel, a magician that some people might know. I sort of was a consultant on his first season, and then I was there for the second season, but I was not there in person. I was there, my body was there, but creatively I was not there. I did not want to be involved in that show. It's not something I can really talk about properly, but
Right.
just I had decided that our creative partnership was over.
Yeah.
So I was in America anyway, had lived there for a while. That's why I was in Vegas in the first place. Then got to know various people because I was there. And then several years later, and I'm talking several, it wasn't over. Everyone seems to think it's like, oh, he went to Vegas and he got a show. No, it doesn't work like that. It took a number of years of just being there and doing normal, bread and butter, as we'd call it, work. And then a producer came to me and said, I have this room. I think you would be good in this room. Will you do a show? I'm like, yeah, I'd love to. Suddenly you think, oh, everything's great. So you go and do the show. And then there was one night where we had the casino executives in that were basically going to say yes or no. Most nerve-wracking night of your life. You got like a whole room full of casino execs that are, in their head they're ticking boxes. They don't care what the show's like. They're just ticking boxes. And finished the show. I was unhappy with the show. And the reason I was unhappy with the show, I did a week beforehand at the Magic Castle, thinking that would warm me up. I'd be like proper in the zone, do 3 shows a night for a week. Well, no, it doesn't, because the Magic Castle ships in or drugs its audiences. I don't know what it does to its
Best
audiences.
place to work for ego, the Magic Castle.
Unbelievable. I don't know what they put in the food before they send them into your theatre.
No, it's beautiful. I love working there.
Oh, it's the best place in the world to work. The audiences are the best audiences in the world. So after doing a week of that, to then go and do one, full 75-minute show to a bunch of casino executives, I came off stage feeling like I'd died on my arse because I was expecting the castle reactions that I'd lived a week. But anyway, so I came off stage and sort of went out to the lobby where all the executives were. The producer came up to me and said, well, don't be worried. This process will probably take 6 to 8 weeks for them to decide whether it's the right show. And then the head guy actually came up and said, we love it. Let's get it sorted out tonight. So I had like a nice sort of surprise with him being like, yes, let's have it. And then I started about 2 weeks later. So I've got no big secrets. I didn't go chasing anyone down. I just did the same thing that we all do. And then somebody came and said, I think this would be good here.
And how was the show for you? Did you enjoy the process?
Yes and no. Like, as with everything, there's ups and downs. But I certainly enjoyed being on stage 2 times a night and having immediate ability to switch up material, and really test stuff out. And by the end of it, the show was great. I was really happy with the show.
How long did it run for? How long did it run for?
2 years.
So you were doing it for 2 years. Pretty, that's the best way to get a tight show, isn't it?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. And I did, 2 a night. So yeah, I mean, that was great. Those aspects were great. What I didn't enjoy, and what I'm genuinely bad at, is the business side. That's not the right word because it doesn't express it. But like, unless you've got a really tight crew, like a really good bunch of guys behind you pushing your show, it's going to be an uphill struggle to get an audience. You know that, but it's harder than you can ever imagine. Like, it's so hard going out to the ticket brokers every day, talking on the phone every day, and after a while, you start to feel like your entire life is dominated for just the 2 hours that you end up on stage. So you've got to decide what you want. You know, it literally does just come down to that. Like, what do I want? Do I want a life where I get up at 9 a.m. and then my entire day is dominated with everything until 7 when I do my first show? I then have an hour break and then I do my second show. And then by the time I've packed up, taken the box office receipts, looked at what's going on tomorrow, done all of the rest of that stuff, the admin, made sure the light guys paid, made sure the sound, all of that stuff. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. So my social life exists between 1 o'clock and 5 o'clock in the morning. And then, like, along with that comes, you know, the sort of girlfriends you'll meet between 1 and 5 o'clock in the morning.
Is that kind of lifestyle possible in Vegas between 1 and 5?
It's a very difficult one to live, yeah. But, you know, like, you are literally forced into that. It's the old actors' lifestyle, you know, where they used to have the 24-hour, like, restaurants because actors needed them. It's that lifestyle. And then after a while, you just find yourself getting really tired of it. But the thing that keeps you there and the thing that you love is doing the show 2 times a night. So, you know, it's that decision. And by the end of it, I kind of felt like I've done it now. This is cool that I've done it. It's not what I want to do forever. Because that's the other thing. I think Vegas is a great place to be in when you're famous. I'm not famous. It's a great place to be in when you're on your way to forming a career. I don't think it's a specifically good place to be in the middle. Like, Celine Dion, perfect, goes there, can dominate the town. Bette Midler can dominate the town. Guys learning their craft, no better way of learning your craft than being on stage that amount of time. The guys in the middle, you have to make the decision of either my life is now going to be dominated by being a successful Vegas show, which is hard, and they deserve massive credit for doing it. I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but that is their life. They can never do anything other than that now because they have to do that. You know, you can't go away for a week and it still be there. You can't go away for an hour and it still be there. You've got to be there every second. So that's what it is. So I felt like I was at the beginning. I'd learned the, you know, good place to hone a show. Now it's time to go on, do something else. Maybe one day in the future you go back. So does that all make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. So, I mean, so you came back to the UK. Did you come back to the UK following the show closing, or did you stay out in Vegas for a while?
I stayed out in Vegas for like a month or 2.
Right, okay, so recovery period.
Yeah, more or less. Like,
decompression.
More or less taking stock and deciding what to do, you know. And then initially came back here because I had a TV offer, and I'm sure you get them every time. Everyone listening to this, every time you do anything, someone comes up and says, you should be on TV, and you go, no, whatever, yeah, yes, I should.
Yes. Now, you kind of go, yeah.
Yeah, here's my email. Anyway, so I had this TV offer, and then that fell through because of that annoying little Dynamo.
Right.
I love Dynamo. I work with him now on his television show. For people that aren't in England, it's a close-up magic show that's become a massive sort of success in this country. I mean, done amazing numbers for the channel and so on. But anyway, I had a TV offer, and then Dynamo's deal had already been done, and it took the wind out of my offer, basically.
Yeah.
So that's why I was back. But then that puts you in free spin where you're like, oh, shit, everything I decided I was coming back for is no longer here. What am I going to do? And then you start rethinking again. So, you know, at this point, I have various sort of TV-ish projects that are still alive, but they're exactly what they are. You know, they take forever. And I'm not normally this honest in interviews. It must be Pete Wardell. Those blue eyes.
Because I sit and say nothing, you see.
Those blue eyes. So I've got like a number of things, but I'm very much back to doing sort of, you know, corporate, and I hate that word because it.
But it's a show. I mean, I think corporate's a great word because it's, you know, corporate's a great market. I mean, you know, everyone wants to. There's nothing wrong with corporate, you know.
I hate the word because it always reminds me of like that guy at the Magic convention that comes up and you say, like, hey, how are you? And he goes, Oh, I am exhausted. I've been doing corporates all week long.
Yeah.
I just got back from Dubai, and tomorrow I'm flying out to Switzerland. I just think it's a word that makes it sound a bit, you
Yeah, well,
know.
that's not corporate. That's wanker, is the word you think.
Yeah, exactly. But in my mind, those two words are pretty closely linked.
Yeah, no, I mean it's so you kind of you're back on the circuit, as it were, is what
Yeah,
you're doing.
I mean, until next year, and then mid next year, some other stuff kicks in that will take me away from doing that. That will be exciting, and I'll talk to you about then.
Right.
But I can't now because I don't
Yeah,
want
that's fair enough. That's fair enough.
to.
So,
Mainly because it's not all in place yet. But what I'm doing right now, I'm oddly, and this is something we spoke about. I'm getting booked a lot to do speeches right now.
you see,
Oh,
I'm so gutted that you are, because I mean, it's kind of where where I'm sort of pointed.
But I don't know why. This is the thing. We spoke about this when we were in Gloucester
Yeah,
sometime
at the
ago.
session.
Yeah, and I had just started to have people ask me, like approaching me about them, and I was a little bit scared about doing it because I always think that, you know, if you're going to do a keynote speech or a proper speech like that, it's got to be real. The content's got to be spot on, and it's got to be useful, and it's got to be real. Whereas when you do a mentalism show, you've got free range. You can talk about how your aura affects the watch in their hand or whatever. You know, it's just that's fluffy entertainment product. But if you're in the position of actual speaker that's supposed to be giving content, then I get a bit dodgy with that. So I was quite scared about it. Your conversation helped actually quite a lot. And then I just wrote the speech, and it's worked, and now seems to be something that
So
I'm doing.
what is the content? What's the focus of it? If you don't mind me asking, you tell me
No,
off.
no, no,
Tell me
more
off camera
or
if you want.
Well, I mean, if you give the strap lines, it sounds really corny because of the nature of what it is. But the true narrative of it is all about how a guy covered in tattoos that looks like a football hooligan managed to become a mind reader for a living. And that sounds like a boring speech, but it, you know,
No,
whenever
I mean,
take
it's the conversation I had with you. That was exactly what I said to you in Gloucester. Was this
Yeah,
idea? As I thought you'd be perfect.
right, tell the only story you can tell. You
And
know?
the yeah, and that's what you've got to do. And the corporates, or as we've already described, are going to love it because you're not some guy turning up in a in a suit with a tie talking about the power of focus. And
I know
you probably are talking about that, but you're talking about it in your way.
I call it hidden information. Like in my head, I think if I'm ever going to try and teach anybody anything, I'm not qualified to be teaching people, techniques and business strategies and all the rest of it. Like that's not my goal. But what I do hope is that use enough metaphor that's exciting and it will ignite imagination. Maybe the meaning of those metaphors will sink in.
The story that matters. That's exactly
precisely. So it is very much a narrative about achieving what was perceived as being impossible. There's a lot in there about the education system, which is weird. Something I'm very passionate about. I feel like I was failed in education.
Right.
So it's about the idea of re-educating your understanding, but without it being like I don't. None of them are ever look at this slide. Point one. It is a story, and it does have a magic trick at the beginning and at the end.
Yeah.
Or part of a magic trick at the beginning and it concludes at the end, but only one thing.
But just sorry to interrupt, but you said about the education thing. There's a couple of things with the education thing. First of all, you're an incredibly eloquent speaker. You're very confident. You deliver very well. You sound very well educated.
It's all fake.
Well, no, but that's kind of I don't believe it is, but if that is the case, you do it very well. But that fakeness or that ability to do that can't be faked. I mean, where does that come from? Are you kind of self-educated in that respect? Then are you?
Yeah, certainly.
I mean, when you say you can't. I mean, I know your background wasn't the most salubrious, and you didn't. So, when you go home, do you turn into an East End? But do you understand what I'm saying? You are a very good speaker, and this is why I kind of said to you in Gloucester, you need to be doing the keynote speeches,
right.
Because And where does that come from? The same confidence, that same kind of thing. Well, if someone else can do this, I can do this.
I think it probably comes from one, not liking authority figures very much.
Right.
So, and this is the history of it. Like I think if you've got an issue with like stuff around you, unless you learn how to speak about that, you're not going to change it. right? So this is my mindset as a kid, as a little kid, like feeling like I was being failed in the education system. The only way I can change this is if I can speak up about it. So you have to muster the courage to go up to your teacher and say, you know, you're a moron, or like, you're doing this wrong. This isn't helping me.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that would have been the first thing, was like deciding that what's the worst that can happen by expressing your opinion, and realizing that actually that's the best thing, is to express your opinion.
Yeah.
Then secondly, not talking about things that I don't believe in. If this conversation right now was about, like, I don't know, the wallpaper that you want to buy for your new room, for your extension, I would not give a shit, and I would not be eloquent, and I would be bored, and the conversation would be nothing. But if if we're talking about things that I'm passionate about, I find it very easy to become excited about those things, and to be able to talk about those things. So the confidence comes from knowing that words are the most powerful things to achieve whatever it is you want to achieve, and so which is a revelation for where I grew up, where the most powerful thing is your fists. You know,
did you make a conscious effort?
I think probably the only thing I consciously did when I first started doing the professional magic jobs would have been to have toned down my natural accent. Because I come from a place called Essex, which English readers will know about, or listeners will know about. Americans won't, and you shouldn't. But so I had that kind of accent going on, and all you need to know if you don't know where Essex is that it's an accent that is connected to sort of stupidity and not so much stupidity. It's glamorous now, but like.
Tackiness is what Essex is.
Yeah, tackiness. Very stereotypically tacky. Yeah, excellent. So I think I did tone that down, but now I'm speaking in my natural accent. This isn't me putting a voice on.
Yeah.
I just think that I started doing it so much when I was doing magic that eventually it sort of became the way I speak.
No, going back to what I originally said, I think definitely you've got an extremely powerful way of expressing yourself, and that's why I thought, when I immediately said you need to be doing the keynote speeches, because
it was after a lecture, right? I'd done a lecture,
and
said,
I know they'll lap you up. But
well, I was terrified of it. Like I said, I was really scared, and I told you that at the time, because it seemed so respectable. Like, I quite like the fact that being a mind reader, it's kind of seedy. It's kind of a seedy job. So the minute you start becoming like a speaker, I don't know. That seems like real. That seems like that's probably hard work and not easy.
Like you say though, if you do it with your own intention, with the right sort of drive, if you go out and start sort of, and I've kind of fallen over this hurdle a few times over the last few years, which is trying to deliver what I think they want to hear.
Right. Yes.
And then you fail, and I failed, a couple of times doing that. Whereas I think if you're delivering stuff you genuinely believe about. Actually, on the education thing, I was going to mention to you, which kind of you know Sir Ken Robinson? Have you?
Yeah. It's funny. We were talking about something earlier, and one of his quotes came into my head. I can't remember what it was now.
He's written a book called The Element.
Yeah, The Element. Yeah, perfect.
So, and you've seen the speech, you've seen his TED talk.
I've seen his TED speech, but I'd read the book before the TED speech,
right?
And I just started rereading the new edition of Out of Our Minds,
right?
Which is another great Ken Robinson book.
It's brilliant. I mean, his stuff on education is phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. And that element thing, I think, was something that I was just fortunate. Like, the whole concept in that book, every word I read in that book rang completely true to me, because I was fortunate enough to find when I was in my element, when I was very young, and then managed to have all of the right qualities in place to make it something that I could end up doing. So the reason that when people ask me, like, oh, how did you start becoming professional? What did you do? How did the jobs come in? And so on. I think the reason I haven't got a particularly formulaic answer is because it did feel like it was completely organic at the time. I didn't sit down and consciously engineer anything. So it all just felt organic. So that's why sometimes it sounds like, oh, you had no game plan. And I didn't. I just knew that I loved doing it, and I wanted to do it however the best I could. So, yeah, the Ken Robinson stuff is fascinating. And in some ways linked to certain elements of the speech, certainly. I use a number of his statistics and sort of quotes during the course of everything to back up a couple of key ideas that I've got.
I use one of his stories, actually. Which is
really? Which one?
The story of the little girl drawing a picture of God.
They will in a minute.
Yeah,
Yeah,
fantastic story.
yeah, it's such a
Fantastic
great
story.
story. Yeah.
So very quickly, because I mean, I'm aware of the fact we've been going for nearly an hour now, and tell us about the tattoos. Go on. What's the history behind all of that?
Um,
You
I
just
just,
like
got 'em.
tattoos.
Just love them. Just think they're great. I got my first one when I was about 14. Um, obviously shouldn't have been doing that at 14, but I thought that was a good thing to do at 14. And then by the time I was 17, I had my whole sort of arm, done right away over to here. And then I just didn't stop, just went mental, just carried on. I think it is something to do with the fact that I do not like performers that do not look different.
Yeah, and because that's the point I wanted to get to is, do you find that your tattoos help you in doing what you do?
100%.
Because
100%.
yeah, because the reason I asked that is because I mean, if we go back to that sort of Seven Deceptions thing, and a lot of stuff which isn't hypnotism, which I often describe as psychological bullying,
Right?
And I would have thought the tattoo's the equivalent of having a TV camera following you, in the
Well,
sense that they immediately put people on their back foot.
what it does is, I think, and again, none of this was by design. This was always just following the things that I love and feel passionate about. I was always going to end up with loads of tattoos, regardless of what that meant.
Yeah.
So, but what I think it does mean in professional life is, you're now marked out very visibly as being not like them.
Yeah.
But they don't want to be like you either.
Yeah.
And that's the best place to be. You don't want to be the guy that like every dude is jealous of, because we don't like people that are better than us. Do you know what I'm saying? Like if you're...
No, I mean, I kind of, I do know exactly what you want. I mean, exactly what you mean. I'm kind of, as I said, slightly annoyed with the fact that Mike, you look at me and I look like a corporate performer.
No, but you've got that edge though that separates you out. Like it's the attitude where it comes through with you.
Yeah, or maybe.
But what I have going on with the tattoos is, I think, in my humble estimation, one, I look different from them, so I'm separate. I'm of another world, and two, there's a great sort of combative nature between the way I look and the way I talk.
Yeah.
Which is very useful. But in the same way, when you go out and you look, in smart suits and you do look like a corporate guy, but then you give that sort of shifty edge in amongst the other stuff, you've got that same... Do you know what I'm saying?
It is an interesting thing that again, it comes back to this, we're saying about mentalism, that to have a degree of dirt and grime attached to you is a really useful thing to have. It's kind of, if you're too polished, if it's too perfect, then it stops being interesting, I think.
I always kind of want them to think, I wonder what he did before he did this.
Yeah.
I always want that idea of like, whoa, I wonder what's going on there. And I actually got that as a review in Las Vegas. The reviewer said the tattoos on his knuckles hint to a lifestyle that may be less than refined, or something like that.
Yeah.
That's perfect. That means you gave a shit.
Yeah.
If you're sitting watching my show thinking about what is all of those, where does that come from and what is part of that? It's just one more element for me. Of mystery.
And they're on the back foot as well, which is great.
Yeah, so I think they mark you out as being different, although less so now, because there's so many people with so many tattoos. I just happen to have like my face and my hands, which is the main.
Yeah.
So that's when you get on your face and your hands, then you're definitely in that world,
Yeah.
They mark you out as being different. I think they give a nice theatrical edge. And I like the sort of enigma of speaking well and being considered in what you say, but looking like you're a football hooligan.
Yeah, it's
I
great.
like the confusion that causes.
I think it's great. So what we're saying is to all the young performers out there who might be listening or watching this, is to go out now and get half your face tattooed.
No, I don't want any more. I get an email a week from young magicians saying like, I see you've got all these tattoos. I love them. I want to get some as well, but I'm worried if it will cut off work. I mean, the truth of the matter is, yes, it will. It absolutely will. My answer is always, if you want to, be a super slick, working every night corporate guy, this is not that guy.
Yeah.
This is not that guy. But I didn't want that. I wanted what I wanted. So you have to be, aware of that. Truthfully, I wish no mentalist would get a tattoo ever now. I wish they all hated them.
Yeah, no.
you know, I want to be the only one. Like, that's my thing in my head, which is ridiculous that I feel like I own tattoos, but I do. Like, it's my identity.
Yeah,
So,
no, and I do think it's, as you say, it marks you out, and I think it will be a huge bonus to you because you now have the credibility behind you. You're not building that credibility
right.
anymore.
Yeah, well, I didn't get any visible tattoos done until I felt like, one, I didn't care what people felt about it, and two, that I had a good enough idea in my head of the direction that I wanted to go in, and that the visible tattooing would not affect that direction.
Right.
So it was quite considered. You know, I had my arms done for years, but in shows they were covered. You know, long sleeve shirt, so no one knew the difference.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's it. I think that's it for the tattoos, really.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, it's kind of is, I think we've done an hour, and I mean, I'm gonna say, and I mean, I've always been impressed by you, Luke, always, and I know you've had a pretty stellar career so far, but I genuinely think of the people of the people who I see on the sort of scene now that. And for me, this is with the speaking thing. I think you're going to have a massive career. I do genuinely think you're going to have a huge career, which galls me. But
I'll tell you this:
fair play to you. Fair play to you.
About speaking, I've never felt more reward from a show. Exactly how I used to feel when I did Walk Around Magic and then did my first mentalism shows, when I felt like I was like proper in my element and feeling that, now I'm feeling that intensified 1,000 times with speaking.
I'm
not saying that to make you annoyed.
No. I stand by what I said to you in Gloucester. First, it's what you need to be doing, and it's what you are doing, and I think it's fantastic. And I wish you all the best. And if you ever can't do the gig,
send it your way.
But hey, it's been a pleasure, Luke. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah.
And good luck with it all. Thanks for your time.
Cheers, mate.
See you. Take it easy, Luke.
Bye.
So thanks to Luke for speaking with me, and if you've enjoyed this, you can see and hear more of these kind of interviews at www.magicstateofmind.com.